This audio is a response to the posting of a message from Americans against the Tea Party, and they are presenting some facts. Well, this is in response to uh, that posting, and I call this facts that Americans against the Tea Party either don't know or they don't want you to know. And as I said in a recent posting on Facebook, a poster was posted that compared President Obama and George Bush as it related to who is the worst president ever. I have no problem with the concept of comparing presidents with each other to find who was the best and who was the worst, except for one thing, and that is when people try to present half truths and lies as being the whole truth or the fact. Now, it starts out with what George Bush inherited. Now, mind you, now the whole concept behind this posting, uh, the poster that was posted by Americans Against the Tea Party, is the fact of what a president inherited versus when he left office and his predecessor came in, what his predecessor inherited. So on that line, what I want to do is I'm going to address the issue exactly what President George Bush inherited and how he came about inheriting uh, these numbers, which are presented as fact now by the Americans Against the Tea Party. And it starts out like this. It lists five things of what President Bush inherited. The first thing it says is he inherited the strongest economy in decades. Number two, it says he inherited record low unemployment, 4.2%. Number three, record low poverty rates. Number four, every segment of the population was becoming more prosperous. Number five, a budget surplus on a pace to eliminate the national debt in 20 years. Okay, now my response to that is taking the last one first. The budget surplus came from the Clinton administration because after all, Bush inherited this budget surplus. It came from the Clinton administration. But how did this budget surplus come into being in the first place? It came into being when the Clinton administration and the Congress, led by Democrats, passed legislation that combined the then burgeoning Social Security Trust Fund with the almost depleted General Fund to make it appear that there was this great budget surplus. This action was taken to make it easy for Al Gore to inherit the presidency in 2000. If it were not for this action, the Clinton administration and the Democrats would have gone down as another case of Democrats running up massive deficits, which would have doomed Gore. So, what the Clinton administration did by making the Social Security trust funds available for the general fund use resulted in Social Security approaching bankruptcy because Democrats primarily and Republicans now had access to money that up until then was untouchable. You see, up until that time, the Social Security Trust Fund had close to, I believe, the numbers were somewhere in the neighborhood of 800 and some $billion just sitting there, and with this was saved. I mean, this was money that basically it was a hands-off uh, condition. It had its own separate account. But seeing the fact that a lot of people were dying early and things, and they weren't claiming their Social Security benefits and the like, and so over the decades, this money began to accumulate and accumulate and accumulate and accumulate until it basically was approaching an area where you could have almost $1 trillion just sitting there, and for the amount of money that was being taken out, for senior citizens and so forth that were on Social Security, the whole uh, thing is that the Democrats were looking at all this money just sitting there and they couldn't get their hands on it until they got to a point where they had enough numbers to pass this legislation to get to eliminate the Social Security Trust Fund lockbox account. In other words, there was the way it was set up. Uh, like I said, they couldn't get their hands on it until they merged uh, the general fund in with the Social Security Trust Fund. This is what gave the idea that all of a sudden that Bill Clinton came up with this quote unquote surplus. The surplus was nothing more than Social Security money being added to the general fund, which then made it accessible to both Democrats and Republicans. So that's where the surplus that George Bush inherited actually came from. Now, as for questions or as for the statements 1 through 4, if you go back and check, Clinton inherited all of those from Ronald Reagan. All Clinton had to do was sit back and do absolutely nothing because the juggernaut was moving along at full steam. In other words, Clinton inherited an economy that was rolling along like a freight train. Couldn't be stopped. People tax rates had been cut from what the Carter administration had imposed on big business and things. Those of you that remember the 4 years that Jimmy Carter was in office, he decimated the automobile industry, he decimated the housing industry, he decimated the airline industry. He just essentially with the him and the Democrats with this uh, joining forces with environmentalism and animal rights groups and so forth, just completely destroyed the economy. raised taxes on everybody, the rich, the poor, and everybody else, forced businesses to close down. A lot of them went bankrupt, went out of business. I guess a lot of you don't remember, even though we had what we call the big three: General Motors, Ford, and Chrysler. Used to be the big four: General Motors, Ford, Chrysler, and American Motors. And then not only that, we had other automobile plants that under Jimmy Carter and things had to go bankrupt because they couldn't meet the rigors of the legislation that the Democrats passed under uh, Jimmy Carter, requiring automobiles to meet certain standards for emissions and all that other stuff. But I'm not going to go into too much detail about that. But anyway, there's a lot of things there that Jimmy Carter and the Democrats did that destroyed the economy in the late 70s, including, like I said, raising taxes on the rich and so forth, and everything else, and forcing businesses to shut down. So when Ronald Reagan came in office, he had to deal with all of this mess. And one of the first things he did naturally was lower tax rates and so forth, and got the economy rolling again. And on into his administration, by I believe 1986, the IRS, or the Treasury, took in record revenue from taxes, but not by increasing taxes on the rich. They took it in because more people were out earning money and paying sales taxes, and paying, paying their fair share of income taxes and so forth. And the nation, the Treasury, took in record numbers of revenue. But anyway, that's another story. Anyway, uh, getting back to this posting of this from Americans against the Tea Party. Another fact about what happened is this, this is a fact. I mean, you can even check that today, and that is this: every state and city in this nation that is a Democratic or liberal stronghold is at or near bankruptcy, while every state and city that is a Republican or conservative stronghold are far and away better off. Even those cities that are in liberal states are doing better or than the state as a whole. What this means is that the policies of the Democrats or liberals will drive us all into the poorhouse. So, in short, Bush inherited an economy that was beginning to collapse because of the policies of Clinton and the Democrats that were put in place during the late 90s. And while we're at it, let's not overlook this. What happened on 9/11 is the culmination of Clinton's failed policies on national security, which gave Al Qaeda the idea that we were weak when it came to defense. How so? Under Clinton, this nation and its interests were attacked a minimum of four times, and Clinton did nothing but make idle threats. The four times that I'm recalling right off of my head is the first attack on the World Trade Center. I believe that happened in 1992. Then we had two simultaneous attacks on military installations in Africa, in two different uh, cities or two different countries or something like that, where a lot of military personnel were killed in simultaneous attacks that occurred within 15 minutes of each other, but they were at great, quite a far away from each other, so it was an organized attack. Then we have the attack on the USS Cole that killed, I believe, 17 soldiers and sailors and things like that. Uh, all of these things, and what was Clinton's response? To sit on TV in front of the American people and in front of the world and the tell the world that we knew who the terrorists were and that we were going to get you. But that's as far as it went. And as a result, Al Qaeda looked at it, and what it appeared to show, what Clinton's response to their attacks appeared to show, is that we had no stomach to fight back. So in other words, somebody's consistently attacking you and you choose to make threats but don't actually do anything. What's that going to do? It's going to encourage them to take it up a notch. And they kept taking it up a notch. And if we tie that in to the fact that also that when it came time for the elections, Al Gore versus Bush, Democrats and their supporters were portraying George Bush as being a wimp, that he was too stupid to tie his own shoelaces. And somebody even said that George Bush, was born ignorant and has been losing ground ever since. So now you couple all that in with the fact that when George Bush got elected, Al Qaeda uh, looked at that and they said, well, so now the America has elected this wimp. Surely he's not going to be any threat. So now we can go ahead with our plans. If that wasn't if that wasn't a perfect signal for them to attack us, nothing was. So you can blame Clinton and the Democrats and everyone that support them for signaling Al Qaeda that we were ripe for attacking. Let me remind you of something else. Clinton had the opportunity. This is one of those things that you may not know about at all, but you're going to know about it now. Clinton had the opportunity to capture or kill Osama bin Laden sometime after the first attack on the World Trade Center, but chose to pass it on, or to pass on it and go about legal means through the world court. As a result, nothing got done and bin Laden got away. And after that, we had 9/11. I was looking at today is May the 14th, 2012. I was looking at a news show. I can't remember the actual name of the show, but there was this individual that was being interviewed about, how about the had something to do with Osama bin Laden and the Clinton administration. It was a general or something that had said that these flying drones and stuff that they used to have back during the Clinton administration years, they weren't armed like the drones are today, where they could fire missiles. I don't recall him saying that they were actually armed back then or not. But anyway, the drones had positively identified Osama bin Laden in this desert area or compound. It was in a compound area. He had just gotten out of a car, and it was a positive identification, because of their uh, video capabilities and things, positively identified. And the commander had to get permission from the Clinton administration to have a ship somewhere out in the ocean, somewhere near where that was in range of where Osama bin Laden was, to fire a missile that could come in and strike, that area and possibly kill Osama bin Laden. But Clinton passed on it or something like that, because he said it would take several hours or so for, I don't know, a ship to move into that area or whatever the case may be. Anyway, that was an example where uh, the commander was going to, I don't know, maybe the drone might have been armed or something like that, but I don't think it was. But anyway, they said to the effect that Clinton told them it would take about 6 hours to get everything set up for that, and they said, let him know. Do they know where Osama bin Laden would be in 6 hours? Now, see, if you think about it, here you have Osama bin Laden in your crosshairs, so to speak. You're waiting for the president to give you a go ahead, and the President Clinton, tells them you're going to have to wait about 6 hours or so. Now, what kind of sense does that make? So that's, like I say, something else that Americans against the Tea Party doesn't, either they don't know it or they don't want you to know it. But anyway, uh, let's get back to George Bush now. So 9/11 and George Bush came into office, and then shortly after he came into office, some 8 months later, 9/11 occurs. And what did this wimp, what did this individual that was too stupid to tie his own shoelaces, what did this individual that was born ignorant and was losing ground ever since, what did he do? Did he make threats or did he take decisive action? What he did was he drew a line in the sand and let the world know they were either with us or against us. There was no sitting on the sidelines. There was no middle ground. Then he froze all the bank accounts of all the nations that deal with us that supported terrorist nations and groups. Then he took the fight to the terrorists' own backyard. That forced them to have to fight over there in their countries rather than them bringing the battle to us in the streets of America, which is as it should be. That's pretty good for a wimp, isn't it? When Bush assumed office, here's another thing you got to understand. When Bush assumed office, he had a majority in the House and Senate, talking about Republicans, but not control. For those of you that don't know it, control of Washington for any president is when the party of that president has enough numbers that they can pass any legislation they want to, and the opposing party can't stop them by filibustering. Throughout the entire history of this nation, Republicans have never had that type of power. Democrats have had it twice in recent years, once under Carter and again under Obama. The main reason Bush couldn't get anything done aside from his response to 9/11 is because Democrats filibustered practically all of his and the Republicans' legislation to get rid of the legislation he inherited from Clinton that was dragging this nation back towards recession. See, so what you're looking at is a situation that President Bush inherited all of these good things, but you see how the surplus and things got going, and most of those good things actually came with a result of the uh, Reagan policies that got the ball going, turned this nation around, and like I said, in 2006, uh, the uh, the Treasury took in, if I'm not mistaken, I do have the facts down written somewhere, in the neighborhood of 4 times as much money under uh, the reduced uh, tax burden on the rich, which in turn put more middle class people. In fact, actually, Reagan is responsible for the middle class being the booming, uh, the booming years of the middle class all were the result of the Reagan policies. But the Democrats got in office and start chopping away at those policies and starting to try to raise taxes and things again to get more money, because that's all they like to do is tax and spend. As a result, we see what the entire result of that is, that by the time Bush left office, people are losing their jobs, and people are losing their homes and so forth. Mind you, now, all of this stuff came about under the Bush administration, true, but it's because it was the culmination of policies that were put in place under Jimmy Carter, plus policies that were further enhanced and put in place under Bill Clinton. So the Bush presidency uh, was doomed essentially because Democrats did not want it to succeed. Now, we hear a lot of that today where we hear people saying that the Republicans are doing everything they can to make sure that President Obama fails. Well, the fact of the matter is that the Republicans are trying to get the nation back on the track that it was on under Reagan and when Bill Clinton had it, and they see that the only way that's going to happen is you got to get rid of some of that legislation that was passed under Clinton. But see, the Democrats weren't going to allow that to happen, and since they can still filibuster, that's exactly what they're doing. So that is the case that I say that if people are going to make comparisons, they need to present all of the facts and let the people hear them and make their own, draw their own conclusions. That is, provided that they're able to understand all of the complexities of economics and the like. See, that's another problem that we have, is that as long as we have people out here that are in leadership roles that uh, the common people don't listen to, I mean, that the common people uh, look to for instruction and guidance, if they're incapable of researching things for themselves, and even if they research them and look at the facts and the figures, if they can't understand what's going on, then that's right up the alley of what a lot of the Democrats and liberals want, because they don't want you smart enough to be able to look at something and see, hey, wait a minute, that's not supposed to be like that. No, they want you to have to depend on them to tell you what's right and what's wrong, and then they'll throw anything out to you and get you to believe it. So even if you research it, if you can't understand it, what good is it going to do you? You're going to go to somebody and have them try to explain it to you, and if you go to a liberal or a Democrat, believe me, they're going to explain it to you just the way they wanted you to believe it, so that you will continue to trust what they say and continue to support them. Well, that's all for now. I might do another part about President Obama when they saying what he inherited from President Bush. Well, what he inherited from President Bush is the result of Democrats uh, and the legislation that they passed under Clinton and under Carter that essentially allowed this nation to get back in the condition that it's in.